So the first thing I wanted to talk about, I was just reading through Admiral McRaven's book, The Hero Code. And there's this one chapter that really caught my eye, and it's about humility. And Admiral McRaven, he talks about the story where him and his wife attended this private dinner. It was hosted by Dr. Kenneth Cooper, the famed exercise cardiologist at the Cooper Institute in Dallas. Admiral McRaven was asked to speak at this event. So he's sitting at the dinner table, and he starts chatting with this guest that's next to him. His name goes by Charlie. And they just kind of make small talk for a little bit. And Admiral McRaven notices that this guy isn't sharing a whole lot, just making kind of small talk, he's more interested in Admiral McRaven than talking about himself. So, Admiral McRaven being a gentleman, people person, he was just like, hey, so, what did you do? What's your story? And this guy, Charlie, says, I was in the Air Force. And so certainly Admiral McRaven's like, oh, my dad was in the Air Force. So what did you fly? And he just wouldn't really, just this and that, nothing too big. And then Admiral McRaven was just kind of like, I think a lot of times pilots in the Air Force, they don't really, there's usually some backstories. They may not want to share a whole lot. That's completely fine. But one of the things that really caught his eye more than anything was, as he described, is his quiet confidence, gentle nature, and a genuine interest in me and my family, which built an instant rapport that often takes years to develop. Okay, so just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. As the night goes on, eventually, they chat and they have a good time. But Admiral McRaven leaves the table and he goes up to Roger Staubach, famous quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys back in the day. And Roger Staubach's like, hey, I heard you got a chance to meet Charlie. It's pretty crazy, right? He's like, crazy, what do you mean? And Roger Staubach's like, yeah, he walked on the moon. And Admiral McRaven's like, come again? Yeah, he's like, yeah, that's Charles Duke. That's Charlie Duke. And Admiral McRaven just starts hitting him. It's General Charles Duke, United States Air Force, the 10th man and the youngest to ever set foot on the surface of the moon. And not once did this guy ever mention that. And so he goes into this long tangent about, first of all, never once said anything about that. If you walked on the moon, that little detail, I think a lot of people that would be one of the first things that came out of their mouth. Like, because
for sure,
insecurity takes over. You're like, hey, I got to impress this person. That's what a lot of normal people think. So then Admiral McRaven starts talking about, well, the Christian faith taught him humanity. This is what he found out later down the road. Christian faith taught him about humility. Matthew 23, verse 12, Jesus says, whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. And he says, but this is not just the Christian faith. This is all religions. The Quran tells us that servants of the most merciful are those who walk upon earth in humility. Confucius offers that humility is the solid foundation of all virtues. Buddha says you learn nothing from life if you think you're right all the time.
I like that.
That's a good one. And then Admiral McRaven finally kind of, puts a button on it and says, humility is born of respect for what we don't know. And the hero code here is to recognize the limits of my intellect, my understanding, and my power. In other words, be humble or get humbled. Now, I want to hear your thoughts about this, but the reason why I'm bringing this up is one of my biggest pet peeves is somebody who can't stop talking about themselves and couldn't care less about what you have to say. Doesn't care. In fact, when you say something about yourself, they're just waiting for you to end your statement before then they talk more about themselves and try to one-up you every single time. I'm sure you've run into those folks.
Oh, yeah.
I've run into them all the time. And I'm like, I cannot wait to get away from this conversation. But there's something to be said about just the person who's like, whoever I'm speaking to, the subject that I'm speaking to is more important than me. And I'm going to earn their respect by hearing what they have to say first. I'm not that important, but they are important to me, that kind of thing. So I want to hear your thoughts on that. And I just thought that was a great way to kind of kick things off today.
I mean, I think in the military, that in particular, I'll be honest with you, man. Like when I first got out of recruiting, like that, like recruiting is flooded with that. And it's more predominantly from guys that come in to Army recruiting from the combat world because we think we're better. And that because it's instilled in us, like from a young age. Like if you're infantry, if you're combat engineer, forward observer, that you just think that you're better than someone who's not in a combat role. So I was on that side for a little bit, like of being like, I wore my 82nd patch. I was arrogant. And then I realized that like no one cares. It's like, and that was a huge thing after like the first year. It was a humbling moment. Like people ask you what battalion you're with, but after that, they ask you where you're at on your numbers and why you're not meeting mission. And then all of a sudden, like reality would dawn in on me, like, okay, like they don't care. Like no one cares. Like you actually have to make your mission out here. Like no one gives a crap that you're from the 82nd or whatever battalion you're with. So I see it from the person being like, and you would get a lot of that, of those guys from the combat world, because we're like, oh, I'm in shape and I'm a high performer. And, what I called like the foundations of being a soldier, right? Like you have to be in shape. You should be able to max your PT test, all these things. But you have to be able to, work in diverse teams that not everyone's coming from the world you came from. So you have to be able to shut it off, and you have to actually be able to care about what other people did and their accomplishments. And in turn, I think that helps you like work better, more cohesively as a team, because if I understand you as a person and we relate on a personal level, then we're going to work better one-on-one or in a team. But it's funny because I was like that when I went up into recruiting, but then you meet a lot of guys within the combat world that are constantly one-upping each other. So, and the Army it's funny because as much as I love it, like that, it doesn't end there, like you're constantly in this battle of, I have this, I did this, he did this. And, you're just in comparison the whole time. But I will say the best leaders that I've personally had, that I've met, are never in comparison. They just care. Yeah. Like I talk about my battalion commander in recruiting all the time, because he was a guy that came from special forces and he was very qualified. And he wore his badges, but he never talked about them. Like he only talked about them. Like we were just talking about certain situations that I had in my career, and he related to me. He's like, oh yeah, I failed this school as well. Like, and you're like, you kind of look at someone like that with all of his credentials and how qualified you are. You're like, you failed. But his ability to like level and be like, yeah, dude, like I'm a human being. Like, of course, like, of course, there's some things that I have failed because I've tried a lot, so you're going to fail a lot. But I think that's why he goes back to being like one of the best, all the best leaders I've had are like that.
I agree. And, based on my experience, it seems to me that, a lot of everybody has their own little bits of insecurity. I think some of the best leaders that I've ever worked with, they have that subtle confidence. They don't need to overshare or dominate the conversation with their knowledge. They just have the knowledge, and they know they have the knowledge, and they've spent thousands of hours learning their craft to become a master at it. Do they need to go out and show how much they know? No. In fact, I think the opposite, folks, the ones who have not put in the time, they're insecure that they didn't put the time in. So they need to make sure that they feel that they need to impress everybody. So, because their biggest fear is that they're exposed. Now, right. Here's the problem, that line there, be humble or get humble. If you're not humble and you just think you know everything and you're going to share all these things, I can't tell you how many times I'll be in a conversation with somebody and somebody will start talking about something about the law. Now, I'm an attorney by trade, and they'll get it completely wrong.
This is going to be the funniest story. It's going Like this has got to be so funny.
Well, and I mean, I've got a lot of stories like that, where just, and I could probably go on and on about that, and it's not as important, but there's just been some times where I've just called people out on it, not just nicely, but I'm like, yeah, no, hey, that's a great opinion. This is typically how it works. And then once they know that, they're like, okay, fair enough. I was recently on a client call one time, and so I'm in-house counsel, right? And there was one time where the customer, their procurement team, was basically saying, hey, our contractor, they are your contractors, your subcontractors. We need to have something in this contract that says that they're bound by the same confidentiality terms that we have in place. You as the service provider, us as the customer. And I asked them why, because they said, well, I mean, they need to make sure that they understand that they need to protect our confidential information. And I just, calmly was just like, well, let me ask you this. If they do something wrong, who is your action against? Well, you guys, the service provider. I said, correct. You're not going to sue them. They are an extension of us. So if they do something wrong, your action is against us because the contract is between us and you, the customer.
Yeah.
So why do they need those terms? And then there's just a long pause. And the whole point is,
thought about it like that.
Yeah, and the whole point, and really but again, I wasn't like, hey, you idiot, this is blah blah blah. It's just like, okay, but then anyway, so the whole point is, it's just and that's a silly example, but be humble or get humble. Now, if you're going to go on the tangent and say some things and act like you know it all, you better make sure that you know it all. You better know your game.
Yeah.
Be very careful. And then I'd ask you, why do you need to do that? Because you don't need to.
Yeah.
Somebody asks you a question, you answer it. Give them the information you best can and lead your teams. Make it all about them. One of the best books that I ever read was, I think it was Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence Others. And the whole point is, if you want to make friends, make it always about them. Every conversation you have, it's all about them. Don't share hardly anything unless they ask for it. Great. And that's so hard because everybody likes to talk about themselves. I love interviews because I love talking about myself. But that's not how you're going to win friends. That's not how you're going to influence. You want to influence? Make it be about them. So I want us to keep. You're going to say something?
Yeah, it's so funny you say that. I hate interviews, but no, I say that jokingly. I was on a call I had an interview last week, and it was probably the best interview I've had up to this point. But I was like in the interview. And it was, the portion of the interview that were like, you have any questions? And then you forget that you're supposed to ask them questions. Well, I asked, her two questions, talked about some stuff in relation to marketing strategy. But then I asked her, well, what was your favorite activation? Like marketing activation. Dude, her face lit up. Lit up. And then she had a funny story to go with it because you could tell that by the way she was speaking about it, she was just pumped that someone asked, because she made it funny. She's like, I didn't know golf was this prestigious event in sports. I'm like, golf is super prestigious. And they pay a lot of money. She's like, so I go to this, her story, it was hysterical. I mean, it really was, but you could tell she was interviewing me, but at the same time, you could tell she was pumped to share that, and so I thought that was really cool. And it goes back to what you were saying, asking people about them, that'll take you very far.
Yeah, especially if you're hitting something that they're passionate about. I think one of my favorite interview questions is, especially if you're interviewing who will become your superior, who you're reporting to, hey, tell me about your leadership style. How do you like to lead your team? Because that's something that you wouldn't want to know as well. I think that's very important, that you need to know what kind of leader you're going to be signing up for. And people who, and unfortunately, my most recent boss loves leadership, and she's very good at it. And so she even read Extreme Ownership. So we hit it off.
Was that, so did she read Extreme Ownership because of you kind of
No. She read it beforehand. Yeah.
Fun.
And I was like, that sold me. I was like, that's okay. Cause then you know what you're getting into. And you know, cause that is definitely a humbling book from if you've been a leader for a long time. And all of a sudden you start hearing this, oh, well, I need to own up to things I mess up. And I got to make sure that these things don't keep happening. And then blah, 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 blah. There's so many different things. And that's why I was like, okay, I'm going to get a humble servant leader. And damn if I didn't. So I want us just to keep this in the back of our minds as we get into and talk, because what I want to talk about today is obviously want to talk about the Super Bowl. It just happened last night. And but then I also want to talk about, because while the Super Bowl is ending, season's ending, we also have a lot of things happening in the NFL, even though there's no games being played, but there's a lot of new coaches now entering new systems and at all levels. So I want to talk a little bit about that too. But I guess first let's dig into the Super Bowl 60. Now, first things first, I mean, there's so many things to unpack here, but let me give you my first take on things, and I'd love to hear your thoughts too. Couple big key stats in this game. First of all, one of the things that I think goes without mentioning is, and it's just the famous phrase, is defense wins championships. I think we saw that firsthand in this game. I think Seattle's defense.
And that goes for both teams too.
Both teams. I mean, how low scoring that game was. For the first 3 quarters? You know, if not,
it was. If that's where, when we were talking about earlier, where I can see it from a marketing standpoint, where like we should probably really market the Super Bowl and have some great, like all the big brands come in and have the advertisements and the commercials and the activations on site and the celebrities here. Because if you are not an average, like if you are anything of an average watcher of sports or like football, that game would have been like your worst nightmare for the first 3 quarters.
I saw it firsthand. Some of my guests at our very small party were like, this game sucks. I'm over here like, are you kidding me? Like, look at this is a defensive game, you know. I get the whole, it's great to have like a shotgun blast on offense and just an offensive powerhouse type of game. But no, I mean, this is a hard, you know, gritty game in the making.
Yeah.
And Seattle's defense. So look at this. I mean, first of all, they held New England scoreless until, if I'm reading this correctly, and again, I'm going off of some stats that I pulled here. I could be wrong, but I want to say it was they held them scoreless until the 4th and produced 6 sacks and 3 takeaways.
6 sacks, 3 takeaways. Those sacks, I'm going to try to look it up right now. I'm pretty sure those sacks were with only 4 dudes rushing.
That's insane. This reminds me of like the Eagles Super Bowl
last year. That's the first thing I thought of. Like, you can't, I think anyone that knows anything about football, even at a low level, like you can't turn the ball over 3 times.
Correct.
You 2 interceptions and a strip sack fumble for a touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's going to be very difficult to win a football game, and that goes on anyone you're playing in the National Football League. But to rush 3 guys up front and to get to the quarterback 6 times with only bringing 4 dudes, I mean, that's like, you got to be able to block 4 guys with 5 men. Like it's just how it goes.
Yep.
And I think that has been the deciding factor in the past couple of Super Bowls. Like, I don't know that for sure, but I know last year's with Philly, they did not, I think they blitzed once the whole game. And Vic said at the end of the game, he's like, next year I'd like to kind of throw in a different, maybe some blitzes here and there, but I need to make sure my guys are more mature and they understand the defense we have now. So I think that you're absolutely right. Like, speaks volumes.
It's, if you have a powerhouse defensive line, I mean, you can do that.
Yeah.
I think that at the end of the day, it's like there's some coaching that needs to be happening before this game to get these guys fired up and to make sure that they understand, hey guys, we're not going to blitz much. We're going to make sure we have the right coverage. And because we're not blitzing, you guys have got to collapse that pocket. Yeah. And why is this genius? Because if you have a young, inexperienced quarterback in his first Super Bowl, now he's played in some big games, done pretty well, but we know this offensive line is not great, and they are weak in spots. And if we can limit the amount of time that Drake has to be able to throw the ball, we're going to be effective because we have the right coverage in place.
Because and you're given time for the defense, the secondary, to drop back and actually get in their zones, whatever, read the quarterback's eyes, whatever, ensure that like the coverage scheme is correct. But in that time, like I think there was a lot more pressures as well, that a lot of I'm trying to pull up the stats right now. Like they had 6 recorded sacks, but I think the pressures on Drake May is what really did it. Cause there were some times where like Drake threw the ball because he was under pressure, like the 2 interceptions. The one interception, I was like, oh, dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I think, and I'm not a quarterback and never have been. And, I don't know everything there is to know about football. I say that because, it's just the truth. And he is a fantastic quarterback and he's a great athlete. But that second interception, because I didn't see the first one, I think they were sitting in, I think it was cover 2. I don't know. I would have to, but it was like directly to the safety.
Right. That's an inexperienced quarterback.
I was like, get the ball,
makes a bonehead mistake.
Take a shot. And the dude, I will give him this. Like his receipt, he was open on the back end of the route, but it was just, I think it was the pressure. He needed to take a shot deep, and he just completely misread the situation. But that's a cost, dude. That costs you, because I think at that point they were still in the game.
Yes,
they were. It was 12-0. And it was like, all right, like you take one shot deep. Now it's 12-7. Now you have a ball game. So
yeah, and couple things that I definitely want to do a breakdown of Darnold versus May, and kind of where they came to be, and a little bit about their performances, because I felt like both exceptional quarterbacks, both have a very unique story to get into the NFL and from where they went. But you're talking about the stats here. Here's another thing I thought was really wild. So this game, very low penalties.
Yeah.
And they were very even. New England had 3 penalties. Seattle had 4. So Seattle actually had more penalties than New England did. But turnovers, New England had 3. Seattle had 0.
Here's another one stat that I thought it was kind of refreshing to see. Seattle had 141 yards rushing, and New England had 79.
Wow. Yeah.
So
yeah.
And they were
on defense and run the ball.
There was commentators talking about that. The team that's able to run the ball is going to win the game.
Absolutely.
I think like the past 15 Super Bowls, though, it hasn't been that. It's the team that's able to pass the ball. Now, when you look at Philly and Kansas City last year, I think Kansas City was so zoned in on Saquon and shutting down the run and being gap sound and fundamentally sound. So Saquon wouldn't break a run. He had like his longest run was like 13 yards.
Right. They did shut him down. 100%.
They shut him down. But now you have to cover Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert with four dudes in the secondary.
And yes, and their offensive line gave Jalen Hurts time. I think there was a different caliber. They were at a different level. That offensive line was last year. So when Spagnuolo is sending everyone and their mother into blitz,
yeah,
we still Jalen Hurts still had time, to put it where he needed to be. So just to break down here, both quarterbacks. Let's talk about Sam Darnold here for a minute. New York Jets, 3rd overall pick in the 2018 draft from USC. So, first of all, goes to the Jets, and the Jets have been and probably will be for a while a circus. They cycling through coaches, offensive coordinators, and rosters. It seemed to me that kind of researching Darnold here a little bit, he never really had stability. He had injuries, there was inconsistencies, there was turnovers, organizational turnover. So 2021 goes plays for the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah.
After that, he is the backup quarterback for the 49ers. I'm thinking this is the 2022 season or 2023. And then
it might be 22 because
I want to say it's 22.
Because in 22 and 23 they played Philly. in the NFC Championship game.
That's right.
And I don't think that Sam Darnold was on the roster, but I could be wrong because Christian McCaffrey was wearing a headset.
That's right.
You remember
That's
that?
right. Mm-hmm.
For a helmet, like, hey, you might be playing quarterback, which is just I don't want to fall off topic.
Yes. No. Yeah, for sure. Hey, adapt and overcome. Yes. Then he plays for the Vikings, and this is where we see him to start to kind of rebuild his reputation as reliable, professional, team first. So then he lands in Seattle. And what I like to consider Sam, throughout this entire season, because Seattle was a force this year. I think they ended up, I can't remember their record overall. When it was 12-4.
I have it pulled up right here.
That can't be right.
This year, they were. I think the Pats were 17. I think they were both 17-3.
17-3. Okay, yes, I'm way off.
I think, I know they both have 3 losses, something like that.
Okay, but number 1 seed, and both number 1 seeds in the Super Bowl, right? Pats were number 1. Seattle was number 1.
Yeah.
So what I saw from Sam in this game, there's a lot of poise under pressure. Okay, so and I feel like this is coming from many years of adversity. He's been through the game. He's seen the worst of the worst, and he's been a part of the best of the best. There was a system of trust. He no longer was trying to be the hero. He's just there to execute the plan. We're demonstrating some resilience. He's failed publicly and repeatedly and just kept going. He stayed persistent. There's that grit there. Steady presence. Teammates trust him because he's been through everything. So a lot of his leadership is earned. It's not inherited. Okay. Where Sam struggles is a lot of the past weight. I'm going to call this the past weight of scars. The scars of all the past weight he's had to deal with. So his failures, I think are, if he had a weak spot, it's coming from hesitation. So you notice there's there's the slow starts. He can be overly cautious in games, confidence swings, so maybe not the most confidence at throwing the ball. But he kind of has a limited ceiling. You're not going to get the Josh Allen where he's taking off down the field. He's throwing the 60-yard bomb or anything like that.
Yeah, I was watching his play last night. It was like this is the first time I watched him all year. A lot of even in like a lot of check down throws. Like he's not taking a shot.
That's right. Right.
Like down the field.
Steady, consistent, simple plan.
Yeah.
And hitting your check downs, whatever. Very safe. Again, 0 turnovers. But his poise under pressure. He delivered key throws early, including a 23-yard strike to Cooper Kupp on the opening drive.
Yeah.
Trust in the system. Some fourth quarter leadership there. He led a touchdown drive in the fourth quarter that helped seal the game. So really it just kind of his background, it kind of gave him this resilience. And I think at this point, it's like I couldn't have seen this Lombardi Trophy go to a more deserving quarterback this year who just reinvented himself. And I even Skip Baylor, is that his name? The guy who loves the Cowboys. He's on ESPN.
Skip Baylor.
Yeah. He even said, he's like, there's no more who's Sam Darnold anymore. It's honestly, he has established himself as a elite quarterback. Yeah. Just from simple. It's almost kind of like I kind of give him like he has like a Nick Foles kind of vibe where it's not very flashy, but he's just there to get it done, get the job done. He's reliable.
Yeah. And that's another thing too, that like when Nick Foles won the Super Bowl, I was so shocked the following year, like Philly didn't go with him. I don't think they did, or if they did, they like it wasn't for a long time. Like
he stuck one more year because I remember it was Christmas time, and I think Wentz went down again or something.
Yeah,
and then Foles came back in, and all of a sudden we all kept hearing the Saint Nick jingles. Yeah, and it's like, oh, here he comes. This is his time to shine. And then that was the year where Alshon Jeffrey missed that pass against New Orleans. And that would have taken them. Is that right? Am I on?
Yeah, no, that's right. So they lost to New Orleans. Alshon Jeffrey dropped. I think that there was a lot more reasons why they lost, but he dropped
Right.
he dropped that pass for the first down. I think that would have put him in position to kick a field goal.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember like when he dropped it, I remember you could see on his face like he was just like that's the like I just screwed that up. And not to go off topic again, but he was one of my favorite Philly wide receivers. I thought he was hysterical. His Super Bowl interview.
Yes.
He's like he's the reason why I kind of view from like a player's perspective, I view the Super Bowl how I do. I'm like what's your favorite part about this? Like I would come here 2 days before the game, play the game and go home. I don't care about any of this. I just want to win. And everyone's like
Roger that.
They're like digging for more, like like doing the whole journalism
Give
thing.
us something here. Yeah.
I'm not going to give you anything. I don't want to do that. His sunglasses are on the whole time.
Right.
But you know what though? Like that's I think that was the common trend that year with Philly because they were going up against a giant. They had their backup quarterback, Nick Foles, and they have to play a 5-time Super Bowl champion at the time, Tom Brady.
Gronkowski was back. I think he was hurt, but he was healthy. It was almost they were the Patriots.
Like they were it was the second wave of the dynasty.
That's right.
You have your backup quarterback, and they said going into the game, the only way Nick Foles has to play the greatest game he ever plays in his life tonight because he's going to have to outplay Tom Brady in order to win, and that was the only time Tom Brady was outplayed, like statistically on a stat.
And here's a little segue, if I may. Not only did they have to outsmart Tom Brady and outplay Tom Brady, I feel like Drake is experiencing that every single game, especially when he's in the playoffs.
Yeah, dude. Like you mean in the sense of like he has a lot to live up to.
100%.
Yeah, it's got to be brutal, man. Like I was talking about that with my buddy because he's like my friend Tafari. He's like, man, we're not good. I was like, dude, what are you talking? Like, do I think the head coach, Mike Verbal, I can't pronounce his last name.
Vrabel. Mm-hmm.
Do I think that he convinced them that they're a lot better than they are? Yeah, I think that he's just an outstanding leader, and he's known to be that way. Like he's stoic. You're gonna hate him, but you're gonna love him later. But I also think, dude, this is Drake May's sophomore year in the league. And he's 14-3 going into the playoffs playing for a Super Bowl. And that Seattle defense is it's one of the best defenses in the NFL.
In combination with that, you don't have a stellar wide receiver core.
No, and that's another thing. Like he's
using C+, B- receivers.
Yeah,
against this defense, which who is the Seattle safety that's like a phenom right now? It's his rookie year.
Yeah, he's
Umanura or something like that. I can't remember.
He's just a freak of nature.
Unbelievable.
And then Seattle's always had defensive backs though that you're like Richard Sherman.
Right.
Richard Sherman. Like, I don't want, like, if I'm a receiver, I'm looking across the ball. I'm like, Richard Sherman's locking me up right now. Like, I'm not
the Legion of Doom. That defense.
Like at that point in time, like that was a fun time though, because in the NFC Championship games, you would see San Francisco and Seattle all the time, and they would be going to war.
Mm-hmm.
It was
arguably that may have cost them a long run because of that game. Yeah. I'd like to see the statistics. It's like because of the magnitude. I mean, not to keep taking this back to the Eagles every single time, but like I think there's a lot to be said about, a season or a game can completely deplete you as a player physically, mentally.
I saw someone commented on, and I don't necessarily know how much I agree with this. I think the past couple of years, the pendulum has kind of shifted back to the NFC. Of powerhouses, especially with this year, the Chiefs not doing too hot. But I mean, Patrick Mahomes, Andy, like that can change tomorrow. But I think someone commented on a Barstool post saying 50% of the NFC teams would beat the Patriots. And I don't necessarily know about 50%, but I do think a lot of them that were out of the playoffs like could beat them on a playoff. Like I think the Rams, like I think they were the whole gauntlet of the NFC games in the playoffs this year, like, they were just brutal across the board, man. Like,
absolutely.
I mean, San Francisco beat Philly, and they had fourth string linebackers in. Now,
What was it? It was like millions of dollars on IR.
Like the one dude wasn't even, I forget his name, but he's like they're all pro.
Fred Warner.
Yeah, Fred Warner. He wasn't even dressing for the game because he was on which that's opinions may vary on that, right. But that I think that there's been a huge shift in NFC. Like Philly wins it last year. Seahawks win it this year, and the year prior to that it was a damn close game with the 49ers and the Chiefs, and then the year prior to that it was Philly and the Chiefs, another close game. So I think it's kind of shifting back to the NFC a little bit right now because the AFC has just controlled the league for so long.
I think it's going to be like that, and I think yes, we're going to see the NFC dominate again this coming year. But let me just say this much: New England has the framework now to be dominant in years to come, and obviously they're going to need to bring on some receivers. But look at their coaching staff. Okay, so Rabel just won Coach of the Year, and as you said, he can get some guys fired up. So if you can put some more talent on this team, they're going to be deadly. By the way, their offensive coordinator is Chase McDaniel. Yeah, who won the Assistant Coach of the Year.
Yeah,
and you have a prodigy at quarterback that you're going to be locking in, putting franchise tag on.
Well, that's another thing. Like all the Patriots fans that are like upset, I'm like, dude, you guys are. I think that may have just woken up like a caged animal. Like last night is you guys are dealing with it, like the Pats are dealing with a loss, but like if I'm an AFC team, man, I'm nervous because that team is they're gonna draft some receivers, some young guys, trade up for some guys. And all of a sudden you get like a wide receiver one that's dominant, and you get, a few other key pieces on the offensive side of the ball. Drake he's going to become an absolute nightmare.
He will. And I will say this much, he has, one of the things I think that he has is a high football IQ.
Yeah.
I think he's able to process quickly. He can anticipate windows, he can diagnose a defense pretty well. I will say the only thing that cost him yesterday was the inexperience. Like from a leadership perspective, first of all, very smart on Seattle's defense to kind of show him some different looks that he wasn't expecting.
Yeah.
And the only downside with Drake is he just hasn't played as many games as Sam Darnold, to recognize certain things. Now, here's where I would argue and say this is where Chase McDaniel should have came in, recognized that, and threw in some new plays. But all the same, maybe Drake's and the New England Patriots, they didn't have a very strong schedule this year. They didn't play a lot of powerhouses, I would say, and they played a few. But one of the things we see here is that Drake just lacks the knowledge, but will improve because he's going to get more experience. He lacked the dependability and the decisiveness that a good quarterback and a good leader needs in this type of game. He can throw a ball. He can make plays.
Yes.
And he has a hell of a lot of potential. However, this pick six, like that's where you can never make that mistake. It's kind of like when Josh Allen missed that throw there. And there was I didn't catch much of the AFC game that he was in, playoff game, but there was one game in the during the regular season. I can't remember who they were playing, or maybe that was the playoff game. I'm confusing, but there was a throw he could have easily made in the end zone that would have sealed the deal. And he just again, it just goes to your dependability. At the end of the day, you gotta make the play.
Yeah,
you gotta make the play. Your team is relying and they're depending on you to execute. And so, as a quarterback, he needs to take ownership. And you know what I liked about Drake is he did.
He did. I watched. I woke up this morning and I watched some of the press conference, and it seemed like he was just like, yeah, like I just didn't play good enough.
Yep.
I think that's pretty obvious. I threw 2 interceptions. I had a strip sack fumble. You can't win a football game that way.
And I think even Tom Brady would say, hey, you know, he is in his sophomore season, but yeah, at the end of the day, made some what we'll call rookie mistakes when it comes to the playoffs. Like there's some times where you need to throw it away. Maybe you need to take a sack. I know that's not ideal, but to force a ball against a secondary like that, that's where the inexperience is coming in, and that's going to hurt you if you make that mistake.
I think too, and maybe this is me being a little naive and just not knowing the game as much as, commentators and whatnot. But Tom Brady sat behind Drew Bledsoe for 2 years. 2 or was it 3? He got drafted in 2000, and I think 2001.
Yeah, that was their first Super Bowl. I think was 2001. We'd have to look that up
because they won in 2003 and
that was 2003.
2003 and 2004 because I know that they played Carolina in 3, and then they played Philly in 4.
That's right.
But I think they might have won in 2001 as well.
Sounds about right.
But I don't know if he was let me look it up. I don't know if he was a starter then, but because Tampa Bay won in 2002 with he's the insane guy. I was hoping Philly would pick him up. He works for Barstool now. He's the best offensive coach ever.
Gruden.
Dude, he's the man.
Gruden. He's a wild man. I don't think he. Now, back in the day, I think he did have that. I think he did have that it factor, but I think now we're talking more of like I'd make him like the quarterback coach, just to be, in my opinion. I think he has a hard time controlling his bearing. I think he's very opinionated. I think he gets himself in trouble without thinking critically about some things. So that's not who I would pick as an offensive coordinator. But hey, here's a good segue. Okay, I'm into our segment of new coach. Who dis? Sorry, I can't say that with a straight face. There's a lot of new coaches hitting the scene right now. And let's just to name a few. Let me, of course, this is where technology always fails us. Here we go. So the Bills have Joe Brady was promoted from, I want to say he was the offensive coordinator. Now he's the Bills head coach. The Browns have Todd Monken. Cardinals, Mike LaFleur. There's another LaFleur in the league now. There's also another hardball who is, I can't remember. Now that's going to escape me too. There's a Jim Harbaugh, there's a John Harbaugh, and then there's Jim Harbaugh's son is now a coordinator somewhere. And I'll have to come back to you guys on that one. But the Dolphins have Jeff Hafley, Falcons, Kevin Stefanski, Giants have John Harbaugh. That's going to be interesting. I love John Harbaugh.
Yeah, I'm excited to see that.
That'll be really interesting. So
Jackson Dart and Cam Scatterbo.
Right.
That's cool to watch.
And then we have Shawn Mannion with our beloved Philadelphia Eagles. Now, new coach, who dis? The whole point I want to get to about this is what, from a leadership perspective, what happens? What does a leader, what are some of the things to think about when you're coming into a new situation, a new leadership role? And I will say this much, just to be candid. I recently came into a leadership role with my company, and having studied leadership now for the past 10 years, it is quite intimidating because at some point you got to be thinking to yourself, all these different formulas, all these different principles are running around your head, but you ultimately have to come to a decision on what your leadership style is going to be. Now, I can hit you with a few fundamental principles of what some coaches can think about when they're entering a new role. But something to keep in the back of your mind is you have to think about you need to be authentic, but what's the style? What's going to be my leadership style? Am I going to come in like a hard ass to start things out and then start smiling, start showing a little more of my personality after week 3? That is, believe it or not, a tactic. Jocko even admitted that he didn't smile once when he became the company commander and when he was in Ramadi for his SEAL platoon. So, but you have to think about that. What is going to be your leadership style? Here are a few things I think new coaches should think about. Number one is, and this is in no particular order, by the way, and how they're, this is not chronologically ordered. Number one, set your expectations clearly, early, and often. So love to, and feel free to jump in on any of these.
Yeah.
And the whole point here is you need to make sure that your players understand what your expectations are of them. But there's also a point where you can ask the players, what are your expectations of me? And this is showing your humility. And I thought this was interesting. So let's talk about Shawn Mannion, for example, because it speaks close to home for us.
Yeah.
Very toxic situation. And the toxicity is speculative. Again, I'm not on the team. I don't know what's going on there. And all I'm going from is just kind of what I've seen. There's some coaches going out, some coaches coming in. So what are your expectations of me? And I think that coaches should come in with some humility to kind of bring it back home to what we talked about in the beginning. Maybe this would be a good time to hear from your players.
I think that's probably going to be my first step. Is I would probably set my expectations. Like this is just what I'm going to expect from every single person. But I think, again, like I don't know how the locker room is. I've never been inside of an NFL locker room. I've never been inside of a college locker room. But I would imagine at some point you have to bring everyone in and say, this is what I expect. And if you don't do it, you're just like there has to be some point of like hard ass at that level, I would imagine, because you have so many egos and so much talent. But also too, kind of what Jocko says, like they trust me because I trust them. So I would that's a really good way to go about it. Like, hey, I'm trusting you guys to do the right thing in the off season, train, develop, study, do what you have to do to come back next season so you can dominate in your position. But also too, I think if you go about it that way, then they're going to trust you in return. And if you hear their voices like, hey, what were some of the issues you saw on the offensive side of the ball next year or last year that we need to figure out this year? And I think if you just listen to them now, I think the NFL is different than any other. It's obviously different because of the level of it. But like a high school coach isn't going to listen to a high school wide receiver and say, we need to do this more, you know? And in college, like Nick Saban's not listening. I don't know if he is. Maybe he did. It just didn't seem like that. Like, what do we need to do better, players? Like, I think he kind of had it under control. But I think in the NFL, you have so much talent. You have guys you have veterans, rookies. You have guys that have been all over the place. And when you're in a downward spiral, like Philly seems to be in right now, I think that you do have to ask the question, what needs to be changed and what do you expect from me as your offense coordinator? You know, because his job is to coordinate the offense and call the plays.
That's right.
So I think the players need to like kind of shut up and color and let him coordinate the offense and call the plays. But in return, he needs to ask, what do you expect out of me and my offensive staff? You know, and how can we make this the most dominant season we've had?
Absolutely.
Turn this around.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, you know, and obviously it's going to change a little bit when we're talking about, like, for instance, John Harbaugh going to the Giants. I think personally, here's one way to look at it. It's, you know, acquire the knowledge first and foremost. And what I mean by that is talk to the existing coaches, have a great conversation with the GM and the owner, understand their expectations. And then there is also where you can also ask, what are their expectations of me? And then the next thing you can do is talk to the leaders on the team. You know, before you even have your first meeting, call them up, ideally see them in person, visit them in their homes. Like, I know this is kind of an old school idea here, but get to know the players who carry the most influence on the team and try your best to earn their respect right away. And by doing that, I mean, it's, hey, talk to me about your guys. Talk to me about you. What's your purpose? How can we align in our mission here? I have some ideas, but I want to hear what your expectations are for this offense. I want to hear I want to hear from you first.
Right.
Because you could come into this meeting guns blazing, saying, "Here, I got the plan. It's going to solve everything," and boom. But if you at least just acquire as much knowledge as you can before that first meeting, and from there, then you come in with confidence and then you have a plan. Because I think there is something to be said about, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, but an offensive coordinator coming in, giving everybody a playbook and saying, I got the plan. This is what we're going to do. First thing I need you all to do is spend this offseason getting to learn this playbook. If you have any questions, just let me know. Like, kind of like, I got it. Here it is.
I think that works when you have a guy like Vic
That's true. Yeah.
coordinating the defense.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that's when that worked, because he's been doing it long enough. And at that time, he had so many young guys and new guys on his defense.
Fresh minds ready to be molded.
Yeah, he came. They lost the Super Bowl from having the worst defense to really, I think, they ever played in the Super Bowl, to coming in the following year. I think he was hired that year, or hired they lost the first round, and they replaced the offense coordinator and defense coordinator. But regardless, and then all of it, so I think it worked for him. I think he's like, no, we're not blitzing. I don't care what you have to say. I don't care what you did, where you're coming from. Like, we're going to do this my way, because in all due respect, the past 2 seasons, you guys are getting ran all over up and down the field. You can't cover any wide receiver that gets thrown your way. So I think that works when you're in that situation. I think this situation, he's not walking into a room with a lot of young guys and rookies. The only thing, and we talked about this in the past, the only thing I think is going to kind of hinder the buy-in is him being young.
Yes.
Like, he played in the league. I have him pulled up. He played in the league with some of these guys. He was on Seattle Seahawks in 2023. He went to Minnesota 21, Seattle Seahawks in 22, back to Minnesota in 23, back to Seattle in 23. And his coaching career, so he's played against Jalen Hurts. He's played against some of the guys that he's now going to be coaching and coordinating. So could that be, I don't know. Like, I think I'm a little bit more on the side of an older style coach, because these guys are, he was just playing with them 3 years ago. So I feel like that could be a huge leadership challenge. And when you're having the spiral downfall, what it seems like from a consumer standpoint, and you're hiring a coach that's a little younger, that may not have that leadership experience, because, some of these guys were his peers a couple years prior. Now you're bringing on an offense coordinator he's going in the roughest fan base in the NFL. There's a lot of internal drama in the organization itself. And now he has to coach guys he was playing with not even 3 years ago. And he also has to get them to follow him and believe in him. So there's a lot of hurdles that you have to, I believe in it. I think Howie Roseman did what he could and made the right choice. I think Howie Roseman wouldn't have done it, but it's hard. It's going to be really difficult, and it's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, and I think this is where to kind of put a button on this one and kind of tie it back into what we were originally talking about, where, we could talk about so many different things, where it's installing a simple plan, executing on that, building a roster like a CEO. And these are just some of the things I wrote down. It's just establishing a non-negotiable identity. This is kind of like what we talked about with Cignetti built with the Hoosiers last week. Getting to know your players well. I think really, and especially in the early days, coming from someone who's never been in those shoes, so who am I to say any of this? But what I think makes the most sense in my belief is that they should spend the time to get to know their players extremely well, understand the fan base, understand what, where they got to this point, what happened between the Super Bowl last year and today. Was this just a ticking time bomb, or were there some deficiencies that just are little cracks that got exposed throughout the season? And I think it would serve them well to do everything they possibly can to then earn their team's respect, earn the other coaching staff, earn their respect, earn the players' respect. It's going to be hard to come by. But I think at the end of the day, you don't come in with a pre-established plan, but I think you come in getting to know those things and then trying to figure out, using your knowledge, he seems like a sharp guy, this Mannion, developing a system that's going to work. That's all we need to get. I know that seems like a hard pill to swallow. But at the end of the day, know your strengths and weaknesses. Know your player. Again, get to know your players, know their strengths and weaknesses, know their purpose, understand all those important things, and then make a call. And here's the thing. He's going to learn a lot. He's got an enormous potential serving in this role. And if it goes well, this guy's going to be, again, he'll find his head coaching job And that may be with the Eagles or maybe with another team, but this is his ultimate task. This is what he was made for.
Yeah.
And he's either going to sink or swim. And I think the best way to go about it is to be a little humble. Showing your humility as a leader, I think, will go a long way. So I think it's a good place to stop for today.
Yeah, right on. I agree.